very warm welcome for us today on behalf of Steve's high school buddies, Steve's family. Thank you for coming out here. Like, honestly, just looking out and seeing all of you is extremely overwhelming. Extremely overwhelming. We have people, this is just a true testament to how much Steve's life mattered to so many people. And we have people who have come in from California or flew in from Maine, came in, drove down from New York or Pennsylvania. And where's Mr. Wiley? Bloody flew in all the way from Sweden, right? Just to be here today. And surely it's because of Steve and what he mattered to us. And I will also say, as overwhelmed as I am, I mean, the one thing just being here with you that brought some clarity to my own mind about something we talk about all the time, but isn't this just the perfect example of what Steve always loved, right? Just us being together. I mean, that's what, when in high school, when our lives quickly extended beyond high school and college, and we were into our whole new, very busy lives, it really was Steve who was the one who would take the time to send an email, right? Give us a call, or send us that text on our birthday, right? Always on our birthday, never a day late, just to wish us, let us know that he's thinking of us, or took the minute to pull us all together for this crazy COVID pandemic Zoom call. There was like 8 or 10 of us on this call, and we were all talking all over each other. No one could get a word in, but it was still lovely that Steve took the time to get us together so we could see people we haven't seen in really decades, right, in years, just like tonight. Just like tonight. He always made it important to treasure these high school friendships because, he would always say, like, we know each other. We grew up together. We shared so much of our formative years together, right? I know that I am in part the person I am because of who we were for each other or to each other, and he always remembered that. He remembered to make the time for the people who really mattered in his life. So, Dr. Kirshner and Dan and Rachel, you need to know that your Steve gave us this immeasurable gift. This gift of lifelong friendships that really, if it wasn't for him, I don't think many of us would have stayed as closely connected as we have. And I remember the last time that I saw Steve, which at the time I truly did not know was going to be in his final days. We spent an afternoon together, and for most of that time, all he talked about was how much these friendships mattered to him, right? Because, for all of the fun and the laughters that we had, or the ridiculously immature things that we do when we get together, he would say that it was only matched by the love and the support that he knew he could count on us for. Months or years would go by, he'd say. And as soon as we would see each other, it's like not even a moment passed between us. And he knew that's why we were his peeps, right? I mean, we understood each other. He knew that he could count on us, our love together, and he, I think, taught us how important it is to continue to treasure these friendships that he so steadfastly nurtured over all these years. So I'm so grateful that you're here today. Thank you to the Kirshners for allowing us to be here today. The highlight of our evening is still ahead of us, right? Especially with this lovely dedication that our dear friend Jeff has pulled together. That's going to be at TJ here later on. But I am going to also pass it over to Joe, who's going to help kick off a special musical performance. So, thank you.
Well, I couldn't say that any better than Elissa did. I mean, it's really true that this day would not be here without Steve being the person that he was. It also would not be here without all the work that Elissa has done. So if we could just take a minute to say thanks to Elissa. This day it would not have happened without the radio. My name's Joe Mix. My name is Joe Mix. Steve was a classmate of mine. He was a dear friend. In the conversations that I've been a part of regarding today, one recurring theme is that this is exactly the kind of thing Steve would have loved more than anything. The music, the reuniting of old friends. I can picture the boyish, infectious excitement he would have had knowing that this day was coming. I first met Steve on a very hot August day in 1990, about 5 minutes up the road from here at TJ. We were both 14 years old. We were both rookie trumpet players in the marching band. We were standing on the hot asphalt in t-shirts and sneakers, and we were at the start of something very special. For 3 weeks before our freshman year at school even started, we learned how to march and how to play our trumpets while walking around, not to mention an entire marching band show. And then by the time school began, Steve and I and many of you who are here today had created the beginnings of the friendships that became some of the most important ones in our lives. Steve was a gifted and extremely hardworking trumpet player who had very high standards for himself, and most of the time he lived up to them. I was incredibly fortunate to be able to play with him literally right next to him for 4 years. Not just because his example made me work harder than I ever would have otherwise and grow as a player, but because we just had so much damn fun together, making each other laugh and cracking jokes, writing silly comments in our music. I remember one time in orchestra, we were playing the overture to Candide, which at one point has this very cinematic, uplifting theme. Steve and I sat in the back of the orchestra. We created an entire 2-minute long imaginary movie scene about an immigrant coming to New York and seeing the Statue of Liberty for the first time, with this entire dramatic voiceover narration, which we wrote in full in our score, and recited in a whisper every time it was played, and we cracked ourselves up. One of my fondest memories of Steve is a simple one from the end of our high school days. We had just graduated. Steve and I met at TJ to begin a 6-hour drive down to the Outer Banks in North Carolina for a week at the beach with Mike and Elissa and a few other friends. We were two 18-year-old kids. High school was behind us. College was a few months away. We were energized and we were carefree, but we also knew that the end of high school was for us the end of a very special moment. So we slid into the front seat of my 1978 white Pontiac Bonneville with its white wall tires, powder blue cloth interior, and wood paneling on the dash. Steve pulled out a cassette tape he had made just for the occasion, and as we got up to highway speed on 95, he pressed play. We started our drive listening to LaGrange by ZZ Top. And like Steve always could, he had, for our road trip, selected the perfect song. Somewhere 6 months or so before that road trip, Steve submitted his application to Princeton University. I wasn't aware at the time that this was something one could do, but along with his essay and his transcript and his list of activities and achievements, Steve submitted a recording of himself playing the Aretunian Trumpet Concerto in A-flat. Not perhaps the typical repertoire for a high schooler, but of course, Steve was not a typical player. In that recording, Steve was accompanied by the choral director at TJ, Ms. Laura Clark. Our first musical performance today will be excerpts from that concerto performed by Steve's longtime trumpet teacher, Dr. Denny Edelbrock. Since 1975, Denny has been a performer and teacher. He's performed with the United States Army Band and the Army Brass Quintet, has given master classes all over the world, has performed with the Metropolitan Opera Orchestra, the Bolshoi and Kirov Ballets, the Washington Opera, the National Symphony Orchestra, just to name a few. And he's the founder of the National Trumpet Competition at George Mason University, the largest trumpet competition in the world, and where I once saw Steve perform. And reprising her role as accompanist for the Aratunian Concerto, he will be joined today by his wife, Laura Clark Edelbrock. Please welcome Denny and Laura Edelbrock.
Bravo. Well, it's so wonderful to be here honoring the whole Kirshner family. Now, if you studied with me at some point in your history, if you're not afraid to admit it, would you raise your hand? Bob, I was looking for you, Bob. And we have Phil. Hey, how are you doing there? Nice to have you with us. I'm Danny Edelbrock. I was Steve's trumpet teacher all the way through high school. And Dan reminded me tonight that he had a lesson with me, and we laughed all the way through for 30 minutes, and I guess never played a note. Is that right, Dan?
We paid for that?
No rebates. It's too late. Anyway, and Dan, he reminded me it was Dan that actually introduced the two of us.
Oh, wow.
Okay, so you have a total TJ performance here tonight. So this is my lovely wife, Laura Clark Edelbrock. So just so you know, this is a great piece. It's 8 minutes long. So if you get a little etchy, especially the young kids, you need to go get another cookie. It'll be okay, right? All right.